In the quiet halls of Mi-7, a prestigious British intelligence agency known for its elite spies and high-stakes operations, a chain of unforeseen disasters is about to unfold, one that will forever change the fate of the nation. And at the center of it all, a man named Johnny English, arguably the most incompetent spy to have ever worn a tuxedo. Johnny, a low-ranking Mi-7 desk clerk, has long dreamed of being a field agent. Though he's technically part of British intelligence, his actual responsibilities lean more toward making tea and filing reports than engaging in dangerous missions. He imagines himself as a dashing hero, but in reality, he's little more than a glorified office worker with a misplaced sense of confidence. But fate, as it often does, has a way of intervening. The Mi-7 director, a stern, no-nonsense man who takes the agency's reputation very seriously, has been overseeing preparations for an important security detail, protecting the crown jewels at the Tower of London. These priceless artifacts are among Britain's most treasured possessions, and with whispers of an impending theft, Mi-7 is leaving nothing to chance. To ensure absolute security, every top-tier agent in Mi-7 is assigned to the mission. They are a collection of the country's finest spies, highly trained operatives skilled in combat, espionage, and tactical operations. This is the kind of team any agency would entrust with the safety of the nation's most valuable treasures. And then, in a turn of events that could only be described as catastrophic, they are all killed. Not in battle. Not in some heroic standoff against a ruthless criminal mastermind. No, Mi-7's best and brightest perish in the most spectacularly absurd way imaginable, due to a simple clerical mistake, courtesy of none other than Johnny English himself. It all starts with a standard security protocol. Mi-7's top agents are scheduled to depart on a mission overseas. Their transport, a private jet meant to take them to a secure location where they will be briefed on their next high-stakes assignment. However, the responsibility of conducting a final safety check on the aircraft falls into Johnny's hands. A task so simple that even a rookie agent could handle it. And yet, Johnny English is no ordinary rookie. Through a series of tragically unfortunate events, including misreading a checklist, fumbling with security clearances, and misplacing classified information, Johnny unknowingly allows an explosive device to be planted on the aircraft. Within minutes of takeoff, the entire Mi-7 field team is obliterated in a fiery mid-air explosion. The country's most elite spies, its last line of defense, are gone. Back at Mi-7 headquarters, a silence falls over the agency as the news spreads. The director, already aging faster than he should from stress, is left speechless. How could this happen? Who is responsible for this unprecedented disaster? As Mi-7 scrambles to piece together the details, Johnny English remains blissfully unaware of his involvement. In fact, he's too busy practicing his spy poses in the bathroom mirror, convinced that someday when Britain is in dire need, he will be the one to save the day. Little does he know that moment is about to come much sooner than anyone expected. With no experienced agents left, Mi-7 faces an impossible decision. The country still needs protection, and with whispers of a criminal conspiracy brewing in the shadows, someone must step up to defend the nation. And so, in an act of desperation, the agency turns to the only man left on their roster, Johnny English. For reasons no one can quite explain, Johnny is given a field promotion. He is now officially a secret agent, assigned to protect the crown jewels from an impending heist. The decision, of course, is met with immediate skepticism from those who have worked with him before. Bow. A sharp and competent Mi-7 technician who has spent years watching Johnny's incompetence firsthand is particularly baffled. "You're joking," he says flatly when he's told that Johnny will now be his superior. But this is no joke. Against all odds, Johnny English is now Britain's last hope. As Johnny enters Mi-7's top-secret operations room, he struts in with an air of confidence so unearned that even the janitor gives him a concerned glance. He believes this is the moment he was born for. The director, still reeling from the loss of his best agents, begrudgingly begins the briefing. He explains that an unknown criminal organization is plotting to steal the crown jewels. If successful, this would be one of the most humiliating crimes in British history. Your mission, the director says, barely able to contain his frustration, is to ensure that does not happen. Johnny, believing this is his moment to shine, dramatically adjusts his tie, nods solemnly, and replies, "Understood, sir. They won't get past me." Bao, standing in the corner, resists the urge to groan. To ensure Johnny has at least some support, Bao is assigned as his assistant. It's a decision made purely out of necessity. Someone has to keep an eye on Johnny and prevent him from turning this mission into an international embarrassment. The mission officially begins, and Johnny is transported to the Tower of London, where the crown jewels are held under the strictest security. Surveillance cameras, motion detectors, laser grids, every possible precaution has been taken. And yet, despite the seemingly impenetrable defenses, Miss Seven has received intelligence that an attack is imminent. Johnny, completely unfazed by the gravity of the situation, immediately begins strutting around the tower like a peacock, inspecting the security in ways that make absolutely no sense. He taps the laser grid with his foot, peers into security cameras like he's expecting them to blink back, and even questions a beefeater guard on whether he's ever considered a career in espionage. Bao, growing increasingly concerned, tries to keep him focused. "Sir," he whispers, pulling Johnny aside, "maybe we should, actually monitor the security feeds." Johnny waves a hand dismissively. "No need, Bao. My instincts are razor sharp. If there's trouble, I'll feel it in my gut." And just as he says that, the crown jewels vanish. A second of silence. Then, alarms blare across the Tower of London. The greatest heist in British history has just taken place, right under Johnny English's nose. And so begins the most disastrous, ridiculous, and utterly absurd spy mission ever undertaken. Britain's fate now rests in the hands of the worst secret agent in Miss Seven history. The deafening blare of security alarms rang through the historic walls of the Tower of London, sending guards and officials into a frenzy. The crown jewels, priceless symbols of Britain's monarchy, revered for centuries, were gone. Stolen in a heist so bold, so unfathomable, that no one could quite believe what had just happened. And at the heart of this catastrophe stood Johnny English, Britain's newly promoted, questionably qualified secret agent, blinking in utter confusion. For a long, awkward moment, he simply stood there, absorbing the sheer gravity of the situation. He turned to Bao, his ever-loyal and ever-exasperated assistant, hoping to find a reasonable explanation, something, anything, that could justify what had just unfolded under his so-called watch. What just happened?" Johnny finally asked, his voice laced with forced composure. Bao, who had witnessed the sheer absurdity of Johnny's security inspection firsthand, rubbed his temples. "The crown jewels," he said slowly, as if explaining to a child, "have just been stolen. The exact thing we were here to prevent." Johnny, refusing to accept blame, squared his shoulders. "Now, let's not be hasty, Bao. There's always the possibility that the jewels weren't stolen at all." Bao raised an eyebrow. "Sir?" Johnny gestured vaguely around the room. "Perhaps they evaporated?" A long silence followed. The security officers, beefeater guards, and Miss Seven personnel who had arrived on the scene exchanged looks of sheer disbelief. "Evaporated?" Bao echoed. "Yes, evaporated. It's a known scientific phenomenon, Bao," Johnny continued, launching into one of his infamous ramblings. "When exposed to certain atmospheric conditions, particularly in a historic setting, where the air density is, shall we say, unique, priceless objects can at times simply vanish into thin air." A security officer coughed awkwardly. A beefeater guard rolled his eyes. Bao sighed deeply. And just hear me out, sir. They were stolen. Johnny pursed his lips. Fine, if you insist on taking the boring route. Within minutes, Miss Seven's director arrived at the Tower of London, his face a shade of red that could only be described as cardiac emergency. He stormed into the crime scene, his eyes scanning the now empty glass case where the crown jewels had once been displayed in all their regal glory. Then, his gaze fell upon Johnny English. You, he snarled, his voice barely controlled rage. What have you done? Johnny, attempting to salvage the situation, stood at attention like a soldier receiving a medal. There, you'll be pleased to know that I have already formulated several groundbreaking theories on the jewel's disappearance. The director, who was one bad report away from early retirement, pinched the bridge of his nose. You mean the theft? Johnny cleared his throat. Alleged theft, sir. Bow, sensing imminent disaster, quickly stepped in. Sir, we should focus on tracking down the culprits. The security footage. Security footage? The director exploded. Oh, you mean the security footage that has mysteriously been wiped clean? Johnny froze. Wiped clean? Gone. As if someone, I don't know, tampered with the entire system. Bow's head snapped toward Johnny. The realization hit like a freight train. Sir, he said slowly, dread creeping into his voice. What did you do when you were inspecting the security feeds earlier? Johnny visibly hesitated. A bead of sweat rolled down his forehead. I may have pressed a few buttons, he admitted. Bow's stomach dropped. How many buttons? Johnny scratched his head. Roughly, all of them? Collective groans spread through the room. He had unwittingly erased the only footage that could have identified the thieves. The director looked like he was about to pass out. Johnny English, you absolute. Sir, Johnny interrupted, raising a finger. Before you say something you'll regret, might I remind you that I am still technically your top agent? Silence. Then, the director exploded. Just as things were about to reach critical levels of chaos, a young Mi-7 analyst rushed into the room, panting. Sir, she exclaimed, clutching a document. We found something. The room fell silent as the analyst handed over a single black playing card, left behind at the scene of the crime. It bore an ominous emblem, a crown engulfed in flames. The director's eyes darkened. I've seen this symbol before. Bow leaned in. What does it mean, sir? The director exhaled sharply. It means we're dealing with an international criminal syndicate. And if they have the crown jewels, they won't just be looking to profit. They'll be looking to bring the entire British monarchy to its knees. A heavy silence settled over the room. Then, out of nowhere, Johnny clapped his hands. Brilliant, we have our first clue. Bow stared. Sir, this is extremely dangerous. Johnny waved a hand. Bo, danger is my middle name. The director, still red in the face, crossed his arms. Your middle name is Percival. A pause. Semantics, Johnny muttered. Despite the massive disaster Johnny had caused, the playing card gave Mi-7 their first real lead. If they could track down its origins, they might uncover who had orchestrated the heist and where the stolen jewels were being taken. The director, though reluctant, knew they had no choice. Johnny and Bow were now officially tasked with investigating the symbol, identifying the criminal syndicate, and recovering the crown jewels before the situation escalated into a full-scale national crisis. Do not mess this up, the director warned. Johnny saluted with unnecessary enthusiasm. Sir, you have my word. This mission is in the safest possible hands. Bow sighed. That's what I'm afraid of. And with that, Johnny English's disastrous journey to recover the crown jewels truly began. The atmosphere inside Mi-7 headquarters was thick with tension. The audacity of the heist at the Tower of London had shaken the entire agency. leaving everyone scrambling for answers. Agents scurried through the halls, their voices hushed as they exchanged theories and bits of information. Amidst the chaos, Johnny English sat comfortably in his chair, feet propped up on the desk, sipping a cup of tea as if this were just another casual day in the office. Bao, standing beside him, was far less relaxed. His mind was already running through the possible scenarios, who the criminals could be, how they infiltrated one of the most secure locations in Britain, and most importantly, how in the world they were going to fix the disaster that Johnny had inadvertently contributed to. Their only clue, the mysterious black playing card bearing the flaming crown emblem, sat on the desk between them. It was a small piece of evidence, yet it carried significant weight. Miss Evans' analysts had already been working to trace its origins, and just as Bao was about to suggest they head to the intelligence briefing, the door to the office burst open. A young bespectacled analyst rushed in, nearly tripping over his own feet as he held up a printed dossier. His breath was short, and his expression grave. "Sirs, we've identified the emblem on the card," he announced, placing the file on the table. Johnny lazily picked it up, flipping through the pages. "Let's see. Vortex Syndicate. International criminal organization. Operates across Europe and Asia. Highly dangerous." He paused and frowned. "They don't sound very friendly." Bao, ignoring Johnny's unhelpful commentary, scanned the file more seriously. "Vortex. I've heard of them before. They specialize in high-profile thefts, ransom demands, and destabilizing governments." His voice dropped slightly. "They're not just thieves, sir. They're terrorists." The analyst nodded. "Exactly. And what's worse, they have ties to several ex-intelligence operatives, disavowed agents, defectors, mercenaries. That means they know how to stay off the radar. If they have the crown jewels, they won't be easy to track." Johnny, nodding sagely, shut the file and clasped his hands together. "Well then, gentlemen, there's only one thing to do." Bao looked hopeful for a moment. "You mean formulate a well-structured plan based on strategic intelligence?" Johnny grinned. "No, we go out there, find the bad guys, and wing it." The analyst looked horrified. Bao let out a long, weary sigh. Despite Bao's many protests, Johnny's reckless approach was soon put into motion. According to the intelligence gathered, one of Vortex's suspected operatives, a notorious arms dealer named Jean-Pierre Sauvage, was last seen in Marseille, France. He was known to frequent a luxurious seaside casino, a hotspot for underworld figures and black market deals. By the time they arrived in Marseille, the sun was beginning to set, casting golden hues over the Mediterranean waters. The city was alive with energy, its narrow streets bustling with both tourists and locals enjoying the evening. But Johnny and Bao had no time to take in the scenery. They had a criminal to track down. Dressed in tuxedos, they approached the entrance of Le Soleil Noir, a prestigious casino known for its exclusivity. The doorman, eyeing them suspiciously, raised an eyebrow. "Invitation." Johnny, flashing his most confident smile, reached into his pocket and dramatically pulled out a folded napkin. "Ah, yes, right here, my good man." The doorman frowned. "This is a napkin." Johnny nodded. "Yes, but if you look closely, you'll see it's from a very high-end establishment. It's got that luxurious texture." Bao cringed. The doorman sighed. "Sir, if you don't have an actual invitation, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Johnny, not one to be deterred by minor obstacles like rules or common sense, leaned in conspiratorially. "Tell you what, my friend, how about I make things easy for you? You let me in, and I promise not to make a scene." The doorman crossed his arms. "No." Johnny turned to Bao. "Plan B." Bao, already dreading whatever ridiculous idea Johnny had in mind, groaned. "Please tell me it doesn't involve." Too late. Johnny had already launched into a dramatic feint, collapsing onto the floor in an exaggerated heap. "My heart," he gasped loudly, clutching his chest. "I need assistance, medical attention. A medic." Several guests turned to stare. The doorman, visibly unimpressed, sighed again. "Sir, please stand up." Bao, shaking his head in mortification, bent down to whisper, "Sir, this is the worst fake heart attack I've ever seen." Johnny whispered back, "Give it time." Just then, a security guard inside the casino recognized the commotion and, unfortunately for them, recognized Johnny English. "You!" the guard shouted. Johnny's eyes widened. "Oh dear!" Before he could react, the guard rushed toward them, grabbing his radio to call for backup. Bao yanked Johnny to his feet. "Run!" What followed was a hilariously chaotic chase through the streets of Marseille. Johnny and Bao weaved through busy marketplaces, leaped over cafe tables, and narrowly avoided getting hit by motorbikes. At one point, Johnny attempted to blend in by grabbing a baguette and holding it like a rifle, shouting, "Stand back! I have a very dangerous carb-loaded weapon!" It did not work. The chase finally came to an abrupt stop when Johnny, in an attempt to make a dramatic escape, misjudged a rooftop jump and ended up crashing straight into a fruit cart. Bao, panting, looked down at him. "Sir, I really don't think winging it is working." Johnny, covered in squashed tomatoes, groaned. "Fine. Perhaps we tweak the strategy. Just slightly." Despite the disastrous infiltration attempt, Bao had managed to snag something crucial in the chaos, a matchbook from the casino's VIP lounge with an address scrawled inside. It was a Lade. As Johnny peeled a banana peel off his suit, Bao held up the matchbook. "Looks like our next stop is a private villa outside the city. If Sauvage is there, we might get closer to finding out where the crown jewels are." Johnny nodded, brushing himself off. "Brilliant. See, Bao? Even when we fail, we succeed." Bao sighed. "That doesn't make any sense." Johnny grinned. "Exactly." And with that, their dangerous mission continued, one step closer to uncovering the truth, but with plenty more chaos guaranteed along the way. The address on the matchbook led Johnny English and Bao to an opulent villa nestled in the rolling hills just outside Marseille. The estate was surrounded by high stone walls lined with lush greenery and illuminated by soft, golden lights. It looked like the kind of place where powerful men conducted their business far from prying eyes. If Sauvage was indeed connected to Vortex, this was the most likely place to find him. Johnny, peering through a pair of cheap plastic binoculars he had picked up from a souvenir stand, observed the estate from behind a row of bushes. He mused. "They've got a lot of security. That means there's definitely something worth stealing inside." Bao, crouching beside him, corrected, "Something worth investigating, sir." Johnny waved a hand dismissively. "Semantics, Bao. The important thing is, we need to get in there and snoop around." Bao was already ahead of him. He had been studying the villa's perimeter, noting the movement of the guards. "They've got at least 8 men patrolling outside, plus the entrance is locked with a keycard system. And that's just what we can see. If Sauvage is inside, he'll be well protected." Johnny stroked his chin, pretending to think. "So what you're saying is, we should just waltz in, act like we belong, and hope for the best?" Bao sighed. "No, sir. I was going to suggest finding a discreet way inside. But I assume you already have a unique approach in mind?" Johnny grinned. "I do, Bao, and you're going to love it." 10 minutes later, Bao stood frozen in disbelief. Johnny had somehow managed to acquire a gardener's uniform, complete with a fake mustache and a pair of oversized sunglasses. He held up a rusty pair of hedge clippers, striking a proud pose. "Behold, Bao, the perfect disguise." Bao, rubbing his temples, muttered, "Sir, you don't even speak French." Johnny scoffed. "Nonsense. I know all the French I need." He cleared his throat, then confidently stated, "Leopain, baguette fromage." Bao sighed. "That's just bread baguette and cheese." Johnny nodded. "Exactly. And who doesn't love cheese?" Before Bao could protest further, Johnny marched towards the villa's side entrance, pushing a wheelbarrow filled with gardening supplies he had borrowed from a nearby shed. The plan might have worked, if Johnny hadn't been Johnny. As he approached the gate, 2 guards immediately stepped forward. One of them, a tall man with a sharp gaze, raised a hand. "Identité." Johnny, not missing a beat, responded in what he assumed was flawless French. "Je suis le grand jardinier." The guards frowned. One of them exchanged a look with the other. "C'est quoi ça?" Johnny chuckled nervously, holding up the hedge clippers. "Pour les arbres." Bao, watching from the bushes, closed his eyes and mouthed a silent prayer. One of the guards stepped forward. "You're the new gardener." Johnny, surprised by the English response, nodded enthusiastically. "Oui, that's me. New guy. First day, exciting stuff." The guard scrutinized him before glancing at the wheelbarrow. "What's in there?" Johnny looked down at his supplies. Without thinking, he blurted, "Weapons." Silence. The guards immediately reached for their guns. Realizing his mistake, Johnny let out a nervous laugh. "Aha, no, not weapons. I meant tools. You know, for gardening, I always get those words mixed up. Easy mistake." The guards, clearly unimpressed, exchanged a look. One of them pulled out a radio. Panic flashed across Johnny's face. He did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed a handful of fertilizer from the wheelbarrow and threw it directly at their faces. The distraction worked bravely. The guards, momentarily blinded, cursed and stumbled backward. Johnny took off running, abandoning the wheelbarrow entirely. Bao, already anticipating disaster, leaped from the bushes and knocked out one of the guards with a well-placed punch. "Sir!" he shouted, sprinting after Johnny. "Did you really have to throw fertilizer?" "No time for criticism, Bao." Johnny yelled back. "We need to get inside before they raise the alarm." The duo made their way to the back of the villa, where they found a small maintenance door leading inside. Johnny, pressing his ear against it, whispered, "I hear voices on the other side. That means we need a distraction." Bao, trying to be reasonable, suggested, "Maybe we could create a small noise outside and lure them away." Johnny grinned. "Or..." He kicked the door open with full force. The 2 men inside jumped in surprise as the door flew off its hinges. Johnny struck a dramatic pose. "Bonsoir, gentlemen. Room service." The stunned guards barely had time to react before Bao stepped forward and took them down with 2 swift blows. Johnny adjusted his fake mustache. "I love it when things go according to plan." Bao, shaking his head, muttered, "That was not a plan." Inside the villa, the luxury was almost overwhelming. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and lavish furniture. They needed to move quickly before more guards arrived. Bao scanned the hallway. "Sauvage's office should be upstairs. That's where we'll likely find any records connecting him to Vortex." Johnny, already halfway up the stairs, turned back with a smug grin. "Then let's pay him a visit." They made their way down the hall, carefully avoiding more guards. When they finally reached the office, Johnny carefully picked the lock. Inside, they found exactly what they needed: a laptop open on the desk, displaying encrypted transactions and messages. It was evidence that Sauvage was indeed working with Vortex. Johnny, cracking his knuckles, grinned. Time for some world-class hacking. Bao, suspicious, asked, "Sir, do you actually know how to hack?" Johnny hesitated, then confidently pressed the spacebar. The entire screen turned black. A loud security alarm immediately blared throughout the villa. Bao groaned. "Of course." Johnny, quickly closing the laptop, grabbed a decorative vase. Right, time to leave. As guards rushed toward the office, Johnny and Bao made a mad dash toward the balcony, ready for yet another high-stakes escape. The deafening sound of the alarm reverberated through the lavish corridors of the villa, sending waves of urgency through Johnny English and Bao. As the high-pitched wailing echoed through the hall, doors flung open and the patter of heavy boots grew louder. Security was mobilizing, and the duo had only moments to escape. Johnny clutched the laptop against his chest as he surveyed the room. "Well, I think now would be a fantastic time for one of those brilliant ideas of yours." Bao, scanning for an exit, pointed towards the open balcony at the far end of the study. "We can't go back the way we came. We'll have to improvise." Johnny grinned. "You know I love improvisation." Without hesitation, Johnny dashed towards the balcony, pulling aside the heavy velvet curtains to reveal a breathtaking nighttime view of the countryside. The estate was built on a hill, meaning the drop below was far from ideal. Lush gardens and stone pathways lay beneath them, bathed in golden light from the villa's exterior lamps. Bao, eyeing the height, muttered, "Sir, this is at least a 2-story drop." Johnny waved a dismissive hand. "Nonsense, Bao. With the right technique, we'll land like cats." Before Bao could argue, Johnny dramatically leaped off the balcony. For a fleeting moment, he felt weightless, soaring through the air like a true secret agent. Then reality caught up. He was falling fast. With a loud oof, Johnny crashed into a garden umbrella, which briefly slowed his descent before snapping under his weight. He tumbled into a large decorative fountain, sending water cascading in all directions. Bao, peering down from the balcony, sighed. "Right, cats." Before Bao could take his own leap, a trio of security guards burst into the room, guns drawn. "Aretes!" one of them barked, raising his weapon. Bao reacted in an instant. He grabbed the nearest object, a large decorative globe, and hurled it at the guards. It struck one in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. With that split-second opening, Bao vaulted over the balcony railing. Unlike Johnny, however, he grabbed onto a hanging vine, expertly controlling his descent before rolling into a crouch beside the fountain. Johnny, still dripping wet, gave an impressed nod. "Show off." Bao ignored the comment. "Sir, we need to move. They'll be on us any second." Already, more guards were spilling onto the balcony above, their silhouettes stark against the bright interior lights. A gunshot cracked through the air, shattering a nearby stone planter. Johnny flinched. "Oh, they're really not happy with us." The duo sprinted through the villa's garden, weaving between hedges and marble statues as bullets whizzed past. The path twisted and turned, making it difficult for the guards to maintain their aim. Johnny glanced at Bao as they ran. "Did you happen to spot an actual exit while we were sneaking in?" Bao nodded. "There's a gate at the far end of the estate, but it's guarded." Johnny grinned. "Well then, let's see if we can't persuade them to let us through." As they neared the outer perimeter, a tall, wrought iron fence came into view. Beyond it lay freedom. Unfortunately, between them and that fence stood 2 well-armed guards and a security panel blinking with red warning lights. Bao skidded to a halt, noticing the small sign attached to the metal bars. His face dropped. "Sir, the fence is electrified." Johnny, who was already midway through reaching out to climb it, froze. He let out a nervous chuckle, pulling his hand back. "Ah, yes. That would have been shocking." Bao ignored him. "We need to deactivate it first. That control panel over there should do it." Johnny followed Bao's gaze to the small metallic box attached to the fence post. 2 guards stood nearby, their weapons lowered, but alert. Johnny's eyes gleamed with mischief. "Leave this to me." Bao groaned. "That never goes well." Johnny strode forward confidently, adjusting his wetsuit jacket as he approached the guards. "Bonsoir, gentlemen," he began with his best attempt at a French accent. I am here to inspect the security system. Very important business. The guards exchanged confused glances. Who are you? One of them demanded. Johnny pointed at his own chest. I, my good sir, am Jean-Pierre, Security Inspector de la Fence. Bao, crouched behind a hedge, muttered, Oh dear Lord. The guards, understandably suspicious, reached for their weapons. Before they could react, Johnny suddenly flung his wet jacket over the nearest guard's face, blinding him. With a swift kick, he sent the second guard stumbling backward into the fence, where he was met with a jolt of electricity that sent him sprawling. Bao seized the opportunity, rushing forward and deactivating the fence with a quick flick of the switch. Johnny patted the jacketless, dazed guard on the shoulder. See? A shocking experience, no? Bao grabbed Johnny's arm. Sir, please, run. With the fence down, the duo clambered over the gate and sprinted into the darkness of the countryside. Behind them, the villa's alarms continued to blare, but they had managed to put enough distance between themselves and their pursuers. Finally, after several minutes of running, Johnny and Bao slowed their pace, catching their breath. Bao wiped his brow. That was far more chaotic than necessary. Johnny grinned, holding up the laptop triumphantly. But we got what we came for. Now all we have to do is figure out what's on this thing. Bao sighed. Let's hope it was worth it. Hours later, aboard a private jet heading back to London, Johnny lounged comfortably in his seat, sipping a cup of tea as Bao worked on decrypting the laptop's contents. As the data slowly loaded onto their screen, both men leaned in. The files contained financial records, secret correspondences, and one name that stood out among them all, Pascal Sauvage. Bao's expression darkened. Sir, this proves it. Sauvage is planning something, and we're right in the middle of it. Johnny took a thoughtful sip of his tea. Well, Bao, if there's one thing I know about villains, it's that they hate getting caught. Bao raised an eyebrow. And your point is? Johnny grinned. That means he's going to be very, very angry. And that's when they make mistakes. As the plane soared through the clouds, the mission was far from over. Johnny English was just getting started. As the private jet hummed steadily through the night sky, Johnny English and Bao sat opposite each other in the cabin, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of the laptop screen. The flight back to London should have been a time to rest, but the information they had just uncovered left no room for relaxation. The name Pascal Sauvage flashed ominously on the screen, alongside lists of transactions, coded messages, and classified documents. It was no longer just a hunch. Sauvage was at the center of something enormous. The question was, what? Johnny leaned back, rubbing his chin. You know, Bao, I always suspected there was something off about that man. He's got that evil glint in his eye, the sort that says, I'd rather like to rule the world. Bao, still scrolling through the files, nodded. Well, according to these documents, he's been moving substantial funds into offshore accounts, hiring private security firms, and he clicked on another folder. There are even blueprints for Buckingham Palace. Johnny sat up straight. Buckingham Palace. Bao frowned. Sir, I think he's planning something big. Johnny took a dramatic sip of his tea, which he had somehow acquired mid-flight. Then it looks like Her Majesty may have to send her finest agent to stop him. Bao hesitated. Sir, I don't think she meant you. Johnny shot him an indignant look. Oh, come now, Bao. Who else could she possibly mean? Bao wisely chose to keep his thoughts to himself. Despite the breakthrough, much of the laptop's data remained encrypted. Bao worked diligently, but without the necessary decryption key, it was like trying to crack a safe with a spoon. We'll need someone with advanced cyber skills to get through this, Bao muttered. Johnny scoffed. Bo, I happen to be quite proficient in the art of computer hacking. Bao raised an eyebrow. Sir, last week you accidentally deleted your own email inbox. Johnny waved him off. That was a distraction technique, standard spy protocol. Before Bao could argue further, a small notification flashed on the screen. A single word stood out among the garbled text: Operation Crown Jewel. Johnny leaned in. Now that sounds promising. Bao hesitated. Or deeply concerning. Just as they were about to dig deeper, the plane lurched violently. The overhead lights flickered, and an automated voice calmly announced over the speakers: "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing minor turbulence. Please remain seated." Johnny's brow furrowed. "Oh, something tells me that wasn't just turbulence." Bao stood and moved to the cockpit, only to find the door locked from the inside. He knocked. "Captain, everything all right in there?" No response. Johnny joined him, pressing his ear to the door. Inside, he could hear faint murmurs, a few clicks, and then silence. His eyes narrowed. Oh, I think we've got company." Before Bao could respond, the cabin door at the rear of the plane burst open, and 3 masked men in tactical gear stormed in, armed and moving with precision. Johnny barely had time to react before one of them lunged forward, grabbing the laptop. "Oh, no, you don't." Johnny launched himself at the intruder, but his attempt at a heroic interception fell spectacularly short. He crashed into the seat instead, sending a tray of peanuts flying. Bao, more composed, took a step back and assessed the situation. "Sir, I believe they want the laptop." Johnny, dusting himself off, straightened his tie. "Well, they can't have it. I mean, they do have it right now, but I'd rather they didn't." The lead attacker, his voice muffled by the mask, held up a silencer-equipped pistol. "Stay back. This doesn't concern you." Johnny scoffed. "Doesn't concern me? I beg to differ. You see, I happen to be Britain's finest secret agent, and I simply cannot allow you to—" Before he could finish, the man pistol whipped him across the face, sending him stumbling sideways. Bao winced. "I really wish you'd let me do the talking sometimes, sir." Determined to regain control, Johnny sprang into action. He grabbed the nearest weapon available, a rolled-up in-flight magazine, and brandished it like a sword. The masked men exchanged bewildered glances. Johnny took a confident step forward. "All right, gentlemen, you may have training, weapons, and sheer numbers, but I have House and Garden monthly." One of the attackers shrugged and threw a punch. Johnny dodged, barely. The man's fist sailed past his ear, giving Johnny just enough time to swat him in the face with the magazine. To everyone's surprise, it worked. The intruder reeled back, stunned. Johnny smirked. "Ha! Never underestimate the power of a well-printed publication." Bao, meanwhile, engaged the second attacker, deftly avoiding blows as he reached for the laptop. A struggle ensued, both men gripping the device, twisting and turning, neither willing to let go. As Johnny fended off the first assailant, the third intruder grabbed him from behind, locking him in a chokehold. Johnny's arms flailed helplessly as he gasped. "Bao, I appear to be mildly inconvenienced." Bao, still locked in combat, shouted, "Use your training, sir." Johnny's eyes lit up. "Ah, yes, my training." He flung his head backward, smashing into the attacker's nose. The man grunted in pain, loosening his grip just enough for Johnny to elbow him in the ribs and break free. The fight was reaching a climax, but the lead attacker, still in control of the laptop, had made his move. He sprinted toward the emergency exit, activating the door override. Johnny's eyes widened. "Oh, that can't be good." With a loud hiss, the emergency door blew open, sending a powerful gust of wind roaring through the cabin. Loose papers, cups, and even a rolled peanut bag flew into the air. The masked man clutched the laptop tightly, preparing to jump. Johnny lunged forward, grabbing hold of the man's backpack just as he stepped out. For a heart-pounding second, both of them dangled over thousands of feet of open sky. With one final tug, Johnny yanked the backpack free. But the attacker, laptop in hand, plunged into the darkness below, deploying a parachute moments later. Johnny, panting, scrambled back into the cabin, closing the emergency door behind him. Bao stared in shock. "Sir, the laptop." Johnny straightened his tie, forcing a grin. "Yes, well, I still have the backpack." Bao sighed. "Sir, that doesn't have any data on it." Johnny frowned, then peeked inside. "Yes, but it does have a rather nice pair of sunglasses." As the plane continued its flight to London, the reality set in. They had lost the laptop, and Sauvage was one step ahead. The mission had just gotten even more complicated. After the disastrous mid-air confrontation that left Pascal Sauvage's men in possession of the laptop, Johnny English and Bao landed in London, exhausted and disheveled. The Mi-7 private jet taxied into the hangar, and as soon as the engines powered down, the doors swung open. Waiting on the tarmac was Pegasus, the ever-imposing head of Mi-7, with an expression that could freeze fire. "English," she said sharply, her arms crossed. "Care to explain why the agency's most sensitive intelligence is now in enemy hands?" Johnny stepped off the plane confidently, adjusting his tie as if nothing had happened. Well, Pegasus, you see, we had a bit of turbulence." Bao coughed. "Sir, we were attacked." Johnny huffed. Yes, but I had everything under control." Pegasus stared at him, unimpressed. "You mean before or after you nearly got sucked out of an airplane?" Johnny hesitated. "Well, technically during. But let's not dwell on minor details." Pegasus sighed and motioned for them to follow. "Walk with me. We have bigger problems." As they entered Mi-7 headquarters, Pegasus led them to a high-security briefing room. The screens flickered to life, showing a live news feed from Buckingham Palace. The British flag waved in the cool London air, but something about the broadcast felt ominous. Bao leaned closer. "That's not a scheduled address, is it?" Pegasus' jaw tightened. "No, it's not." Suddenly, Pascal Sauvage appeared on screen. The billionaire was standing on the steps of the palace, surrounded by his security detail. His smirk was unmistakable. "Ladies and gentlemen of Britain," Sauvage began smoothly, "I am honored to inform you that our beloved country is on the cusp of an exciting new era. As of today, I am taking the necessary steps to restore order and efficiency to the British monarchy. Consider this a restructuring." "A restructuring?" Johnny blinked. "Restructuring? He makes it sound like he's changing a plumbing system." Bao looked pale. "Sir, I think he's declaring himself the new King of England." Johnny snorted. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. The monarchy doesn't work that way. You can't just declare yourself king. There are rules, traditions, a whole—" He trailed off as the screen zoomed in on a signed document, sealed with the royal crest. Pegasus turned to them grimly. "That is an official abdication document." Johnny's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying the Queen resigned?" Bao gulped. "Looks like it, sir." Johnny scoffed. "Well, I hardly think she came up with that idea. Sauvage must have forced her, which means—" He gasped dramatically. "The Queen is in trouble." Pegasus nodded. "That's why you two need to get to Buckingham Palace immediately. If Sauvage succeeds in his plan, by this time tomorrow, he'll be crowned king." Johnny straightened. "Well, not on my watch." Pegasus narrowed her eyes. "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Under the cover of darkness, Johnny and Bao made their way to Buckingham Palace. A grand building during the day, at night, it was an imposing fortress. Guards patrolled the perimeter, and security cameras monitored every entrance. Johnny pulled out a small gadget from his jacket. "All right, Bao, watch and learn. This little device will disable their surveillance for exactly 30 seconds. Bao looked impressed. "Where did you get that?" Johnny hesitated. "The Mi-7 supply room." Bao sighed. That's a key fob, sir. Johnny frowned and pressed the button. The car in the distance chirped twice. Ah, Johnny muttered. That explains why my Aston Martin kept unlocking itself. Before Bao could suggest a different plan, Johnny boldly stepped forward. He crouched low, moving stealthily toward the palace walls, only to trip over his own shoelace, sending him crashing into a hedge. Bao closed his eyes in defeat. Sir, perhaps we should try a less dramatic approach. After regaining his dignity, Johnny and Bao decided to enter through a less conventional route, the old servant tunnels beneath the palace. According to Miss Evans' blueprints, these tunnels had been used for centuries by royal staff, offering the perfect covert entrance. Navigating the narrow passageway, they moved cautiously. The air smelled of damp stone and history, and faint echoes of footsteps above reminded them of just how much security was lurking inside. Johnny grinned. See, Bao? We're like ghosts, silent, unseen, untouchable. At that exact moment, the floor gave way beneath Johnny, and he plunged into a hidden pit. Bao peered down. Sir, are you all right? Johnny groaned. Oh yes, Bao. I always enjoy falling into ancient holes. Bao threw down a rope, and after much struggle, and some unnecessary dramatic commentary from Johnny, they pressed forward. Emerging from the tunnels, they found themselves inside the grand halls of Buckingham Palace. Bao pointed to a set of double doors. That's the throne room. If Sauvage is anywhere, it's there. Johnny took a deep breath. Right. We go in, we find the queen, and we stop Sauvage. Bao nodded. And if there are guards? Johnny winked. I use my secret weapon. Bao hesitated. And that is? Johnny pulled out a teapot. Bao blinked. Sir, why do you have that? Johnny grinned. Let's just say, I have a plan. They pushed the doors open and stepped into the throne room. There, standing on the royal carpet, was Pascal Sauvage. Behind him, seated in her ornate chair, was the queen, bound and looking furious. Sauvage turned, his smirk growing wider. Ah, Johnny English. I was wondering when you'd finally catch up. Johnny took an exaggerated sip of tea from his teapot. Sauvage, you do realize you're trespassing? Sauvage chuckled. Hardly. By this time tomorrow this palace will be mine. Britain will be mine. Johnny set down his teacup. Well, I hate to break it to you, but I rather like my country the way it is. Sauvage's smirk faded. And what exactly do you plan to do about it? Johnny took a confident step forward. Oh, nothing much. He casually raised his hand, revealing a small remote control. Sauvage's eyes narrowed. What is that? Johnny grinned. The key to your downfall. He pressed the button. As a loud alarm blared throughout the palace, Johnny watched as chaos unfolded. The showdown was just beginning. The moment Johnny English pressed the mysterious remote control, an ear-splitting alarm blared through the grand corridors of Buckingham Palace. The sound echoed off the marble floors and intricately decorated walls, sending the entire security force into a frenzy. Pascal Sauvage, momentarily stunned, turned to face Johnny, his smirk faltering. He hadn't anticipated interference at this stage, not when he was so close to seizing the British crown. Johnny, however, stood with an air of smug confidence, as if he had planned everything perfectly. He adjusted his slightly crumpled suit, straightened his tie, and grinned at Sauvage. You see, Sauvage, Johnny began, pacing dramatically across the throne room, you made one tiny mistake. Sauvage folded his arms. And what is that? Johnny stopped, tilting his head slightly. You underestimated me. Bao, standing behind Johnny, blinked in confusion. Sir, what exactly does the remote control do? Johnny chuckled. Ah, well, Bao, let's just say it's about to. The chandelier above them suddenly crashed to the floor, narrowly missing Johnny by inches. A heavy silence filled the room. Sauvage stared at the wreckage, then slowly turned back to Johnny, raising an eyebrow. Johnny gulped. That was not what I intended. Bao groaned. Sir, did you test the device before pressing the button? Johnny scoffed. Oh, it's not, Bao. A true spy never tests his gadgets. It ruins the element of surprise. The palace guards, now fully aware of the disturbance, stormed into the ornate throne room with their weapons drawn. Their polished black boots pounded against the red velvet carpets, and their expressions were sharp with urgency. Sauvage smiled, regaining his composure. Thank you, English, for setting off the alarm. Now my men will take care of you. Johnny's smirk returned. He snapped his fingers, and from seemingly nowhere, several My-7 agents burst into the room. Pegasus had anticipated that Johnny would need backup, and she had discreetly sent reinforcements to the palace grounds. Bao exhaled in relief. Finally, some actual professionals. Johnny scoffed. Bao, please, I'm standing right here. The tension in the room crackled like an approaching storm. My-7 agents squared off against Sauvage's personal security, each side bracing for an inevitable clash. Suddenly, chaos erupted. The My-7 agents launched into action, tackling guards, dodging bullets, and engaging in combat. Sauvage's men, outnumbered but better armed, fought back fiercely. The throne room, once a place of royal elegance, became a battlefield of flying fists, overturned furniture, and shattered glass. Johnny, in the middle of the fray, found himself cornered by a particularly muscular guard who cracked his knuckles menacingly. Ah, Johnny said, eyeing the man's tree-trunk-sized arms. I don't suppose we could talk this out over a nice cup of tea? The guard swung a punch. Johnny ducked clumsily, causing the man to punch straight into a marble column. He howled in pain, shaking his injured fist. Johnny, seeing an opportunity, grabbed a decorative royal scepter from a display case and swung it wildly. Unfortunately, he missed entirely, losing his balance and stumbling backward into a table filled with ceremonial plates. Bao, engaged in his own fight, briefly glanced at the disaster and sighed. Sir, maybe less improvisation. Johnny scrambled back to his feet, still gripping the royal scepter like a sword. Nonsense, Bao. I've got everything under control. At that precise moment, he accidentally pressed a hidden button on the scepter, causing a secret compartment to spring open. Inside, a small, ancient-looking key gleamed in the dim light. Sauvage, who had been dueling a My-7 agent, saw the key and his eyes widened with panic. Johnny noticed the reaction and smirked. Well, 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 what do we have here? He turned the key over in his hands. An engraving on the side read, For the true heir. Bao looked over Johnny's shoulder. Sir, I think that key might be important. Sauvage lunged forward desperately, trying to snatch the key from Johnny's grasp. Johnny, startled, threw the scepter into the air out of pure reflex. Both men watched in slow motion as the scepter twirled upward, the key flipping end over end before landing directly into Bao's hands. Johnny exhaled in relief. Ah, excellent teamwork, Bao. Precisely as I planned. Bao looked unconvinced. Of course, sir. Sauvage snarled in frustration. His plan was falling apart before his eyes. With his guards either incapacitated or struggling against My-7's superior numbers, his options were running thin. But Sauvage had one final move left. Reaching into his coat pocket, he pulled out a small detonator and held it up. If I can't be king, no one can, he growled. Johnny's smile faltered. Oh dear. Sauvage pressed the button. For a split second, nothing happened. Then a low rumble shook the palace. Bao's face paled. Sir, I think he just set off a bomb. Johnny cleared his throat. Yes, I had a feeling about that. The chandeliers trembled, dust falling from the gold-trimmed ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, a muffled explosion sent a tremor through the walls. Sauvage, looking triumphant, started backing away. "Gentlemen, I'd love to stay and chat, but I have a flight to catch." Johnny narrowed his eyes. "Oh no, you don't." Without thinking, he grabbed a ceremonial spear from the wall, aimed, and hurled it across the room. It soared through the air, striking Sauvage's coat sleeve, pinning him against a wooden pillar. Sauvage struggled and cursed as Johnny and Bao ran forward, grabbing him before he could escape. "You see, Sauvage," Johnny panted, adjusting his disheveled tie. "In the end, the good guys always win." Sauvage glared. "This isn't over." Johnny smirked. "Oh, but it is." As Miss Seven agents secured Sauvage in handcuffs, Johnny took a deep breath. The battle was over. Bao dusted off his suit. "Sir, what do we do about the bomb?" He blinked. "Oh, right." Suddenly, a voice crackled over their earpieces. "Johnny, Bao, get out of there. The palace is compromised." It was Pegasus. Johnny straightened his shoulders. "Well, Bao, I suppose it's time for—" Before he could finish, the walls shook again, and debris rained down from the ceiling. Bao grabbed his arm. "Sir, I really think we should run." Johnny sighed. "Fine, fine, but we're doing it stylishly." And with that, the two spies raced for the exit, with seconds to spare before the next explosion. Us, Johnny English and Bao, sprinted through the opulent halls of Buckingham Palace. The tremors from the planted bombs reverberated beneath their feet. Dust cascaded from the ornate ceilings, and the once immaculate corridors were now littered with debris. The echoes of distant explosions filled the air, accompanied by the chaotic shouts of my 7 agents securing the scene. Bao, always the more level-headed of the two, turned to Johnny while dodging a falling chandelier. "Sir, do you actually have a plan? Or are we just running blindly into certain death?" Johnny, adjusting his slightly singed tie, shot his partner a confident smirk. "Bao, I always have a plan. It's just that I haven't decided on which brilliant one to use yet." Bao sighed but kept running. Behind them, the captured Pascal Sauvage, still pinned against the wooden pillar by Johnny's expertly thrown spear, screamed at his remaining guards. "Stop them, you fools! Kill them if you must!" The guards, though hesitant in the face of Miss Seven's overwhelming presence, were still loyal to their would-be king. 2 of them broke away from the chaos and took off after Johnny and Bao, their polished black boots clattering against the palace floor. Johnny and Bao burst through a pair of golden double doors, finding themselves in a lavishly decorated state dining room. A long banquet table, still set for a formal event, stretched from one end of the room to the other. Massive portraits of past monarchs loomed over them, their expressions almost judging the current situation. "Sir, they're gaining on us," Bao warned, glancing over his shoulder as their pursuers entered the room. Johnny assessed his surroundings, his mind racing for a solution. His eyes landed on the gleaming silver serving trays neatly stacked on a side table. He grinned. "Bo, grab a tray," he ordered. "What?" Johnny didn't wait for an answer. He lunged forward, grabbed a tray, and threw himself onto the long banquet table, belly down. The polished surface provided the perfect runway, and with a push, Johnny glided effortlessly down the length of the table like a champion bobsledder. Bao, muttering under his breath, grabbed his own tray and did the same. "This is ridiculous." Their momentum carried them through a pair of swinging doors at the far end of the room, leading into the palace kitchens. A dozen startled chefs and waitstaff gasped as the 2 secret agents crash-landed into a stack of plates and copper pots, sending them clattering to the ground. Johnny tumbled to his feet, brushing flour from his jacket. "Ah, Bao, remind me to leave a review for the palace's kitchen staff. Excellent sliding surfaces." Bao groaned. "Sir, we really need to keep moving." The guards stormed in, shoving aside panicked kitchen workers in their pursuit. One of them pulled out a pistol and fired a shot, shattering a nearby stack of expensive china. Johnny yelped. "How rude. Do you know how much those plates cost?" Bao yanked Johnny toward an open service door leading to the loading dock at the back of the palace. The two spies burst outside, only to be greeted by the blaring sirens of arriving police vehicles and my 7 reinforcements. Johnny exhaled dramatically. "Ah, perfect timing. I do love a good cavalry entrance." Before they could celebrate their temporary escape, a black SUV screeched around the corner, tires screeching against the cobblestone. The window rolled down, revealing a well-dressed hitman, one of Sauvage's remaining top enforcers. The assassin raised a silenced pistol and fired. Johnny and Bao dove for cover behind a row of parked motorcycles, the bullets pinging off metal. Johnny peeked over the seat of one of the bikes and grinned. "Bo, I do believe it's time for a high-speed getaway." Bao's face fell. "Sir, please don't say." Too late. Johnny had already swung himself onto a sleek black Ducati, revving the engine dramatically. "Hop on, Bao." Resigned to his fate, Bao climbed onto the back of the motorcycle, gripping Johnny's waist. "Sir, do you even know how to drive this thing?" Johnny scoffed. "Bo, I once watched a 5-minute tutorial on YouTube. I'm practically a professional." Without another word, Johnny twisted the throttle, and the bike roared to life, tearing away from the palace grounds just as more bullets rained down around them. The assassin's SUV roared after them, followed by a second vehicle filled with Sauvage's remaining men. London at night was a blur of neon lights, honking cars, and startled pedestrians as Johnny wove the motorcycle through the bustling city streets. "Sir, we are causing absolute mayhem," Bao shouted over the wind. "I call it making an entrance," Johnny replied, leaning into a sharp turn that nearly sent them flying into a double-decker bus. Behind them, the pursuing SUVs plowed through traffic, causing screeching tires and near collisions as they tried to keep up. One of the hitmen leaned out of a window and fired again. The bullet whizzed past Johnny's ear, and he yelped. That was uncomfortably close. Bao, holding on for dear life, looked back. "Sir, we need to lose them fast." Johnny spotted an upcoming narrow alleyway, just barely wide enough for their motorcycle. Grinning, he veered sharply to the right. "Hold on, Bao." They squeezed into the alley, barely missing the brick walls on either side. Sparks flew from the motorcycle's foot pegs as they scraped against the ground. The first SUV tried to follow, but it was too large. It smashed into the alley entrance, wedging itself between the walls. The second SUV skidded to a stop just in time, but the damage was done. Johnny and Bao had lost their pursuers. They emerged from the alley onto a quiet London street, the hum of the motorcycle's engine the only sound. Bao exhaled. "Sir, I can't believe that worked." Johnny, looking smug, straightened his tie. "Bo, you really must start having more faith in me." Before Bao could reply, Johnny's phone buzzed. He answered it. It was Pegasus. "Johnny, where are you?" "Oh, just taking in the scenic routes of London. Beautiful city, really." Pegasus sighed. "Get back to headquarters immediately. We need to prepare for the final move against Sauvage." Johnny's expression hardened. "Right? Time to end this once and for all." And with that, he gunned the engine, the motorcycle roaring toward their next mission. The evening air in London carried a crisp chill, a stark contrast to the intensity of the events unraveling. The streets were still buzzing with the aftermath of the motorcycle chase, and Johnny English, ever the persistent spy, knew there was no time to waste. Sauvage might have been exposed, but he was still a free man, and worse yet, he was on the verge of completing his sinister coup. After the exhilarating escape, Johnny and Bao had made their way back to My 7 headquarters, a building discreetly tucked away in the heart of London. The My 7 office was now in chaos, with agents scrambling, reports being thrown across desks, and Pegasus barking orders into multiple phones. The once orderly command center looked more like a war room, with red warning lights flashing over surveillance monitors. Johnny strolled in casually, adjusting his tie as if he had just returned from a leisurely afternoon tea. Right then, what did I miss? Pegasus glared at him. What you missed, English, is the fact that Savage still has control over the palace. His security is on high alert, and by morning he plans to have himself officially crowned as king. Bao frowned. But isn't the queen safe? We rescued her before he could. Pegasus shook his head. Yes, but as long as he remains in Buckingham Palace, he can manipulate the public into believing he is the rightful ruler. If we don't remove him from power before dawn, he'll have legally secured his place. Johnny smirked and dusted off his lapels. Well then, I suppose it's time for the grand finale. I'll just waltz into the palace, take down Savage, and save the day. Pegasus sighed in frustration. This isn't a game, English. You can't just walk into Buckingham Palace unnoticed. He's tripled security, and my 7 is stretched too thin to launch a full assault. There's only one way in now, through the secret underground tunnels. Bao's eyes widened. The royal passageways. Pegasus nodded grimly. It's a network of hidden tunnels that date back centuries. They were designed as escape routes for the monarchy, but they also lead directly into the throne room. If you can navigate the tunnels and get inside, you might be able to expose Savage before he secures the crown. Johnny clapped his hands together. A daring infiltration, a perilous journey through the depths of the royal fortress, and a last-minute victory? Pegasus, you do know how to make things exciting. Pegasus rolled his eyes. Beau, go with him. And for the love of Britain, English, try not to embarrass us. With minimal preparation, Johnny and Bao found themselves standing at the entrance of a centuries-old tunnel system, hidden beneath a nondescript building just outside the palace grounds. The entrance was a heavy stone doorway, nearly forgotten in time, covered in cobwebs and dust. Johnny took a deep breath and adjusted his high-tech My 7 watch. All right, Bao. This is where things get fun. Bao groaned as he peered into the dark tunnel ahead, the stone walls damp and covered in ancient carvings. Sir, I don't suppose you brought a torch? Johnny smiled, pressing a button on his watch, which emitted a bright beam of light. Bao, please. A good spy always comes prepared. They stepped cautiously into the tunnel, their footsteps echoing against the hollow stone. The air was thick with centuries of dust, making it difficult to breathe. Bao hesitated. You don't think there are rats down here, do you? Johnny scoffed. Bao, we're on a mission to save the monarchy. Surely you're not afraid of a few? Just as he spoke, something skittered across his shoe. Johnny yelped and leaped onto Bao's back. Good heavens, it touched me. It touched me. Bao groaned under Johnny's weight. Sir, I think that was just a piece of rubble. Johnny coughed and straightened his jacket, stepping off Bao. Yes, well, we should keep moving. No time for distractions. They continued deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels, following an old hand-drawn map that Pegasus had provided. The journey wasn't easy. Several times they had to navigate collapsing pathways, avoid booby traps designed centuries ago, and squeeze through tight passageways that were clearly not built for modern-day agents. At one point, they encountered a flooded section of the tunnel. Bao hesitated. Sir, this passageway is submerged. There's no way through unless we swim. Johnny groaned. I knew I should have brought my 7 inflatable tuxedo. Without any alternative, they waded through the icy water, their suits completely drenched by the time they emerged on the other side. After what felt like an eternity, they finally reached a rusted metal grate at the end of the tunnel. Through the bars they could see the glorious throne room where Savage stood, smug and confident, preparing for his self-proclaimed coronation. Johnny turned to Bao. This is it. Time to remind that overgrown Frenchman who really runs this country. Bao sighed. Sir, I don't suppose you have a discreet way of getting through this gate. Johnny pulled a miniature explosive pen from his jacket pocket. Bao, I always come prepared. With a flick of his wrist, Johnny activated the pen and placed it against the lock. A small but precise explosion blasted the lock apart, allowing them to push open the grate and step into the grand throne room. At the center of the room, Pascal Sauvage stood, wearing ceremonial royal robes, a smug grin plastered across his face as his lackeys cheered him on. He turned, eyes narrowing as Johnny strolled in confidently. "Ah, English," Sauvage sneered. "I was wondering when you'd make your grand entrance." Johnny straightened his bow tie and grinned. "I do love a good royal affair, but I'm afraid you've overstayed your welcome." Sauvage chuckled. "And what exactly do you plan to do, English? My guards are everywhere. The official coronation papers are ready, and the world will recognize me as king within the hour." Johnny smirked. "Oh, I have a few surprises up my sleeve." Bao stepped forward. "Sir, please tell me you actually do." Johnny reached into his pocket and revealed a small recording device, pressing play. A familiar voice echoed through the throne room. It was Sauvage's own voice, confessing to his crimes, detailing his plans, and mocking the British people. The gathered officials gasped. Reporters, previously invited to witness the coronation, immediately turned their cameras towards Sauvage. Sauvage's face turned pale. That's a fake." Johnny waggled his eyebrows. "Oh no, it's quite real. And it's being broadcast to the nation as we speak." Sauvage lunged forward in rage, but before he could do anything, my 7 agents stormed in, surrounding him. Johnny leaned casually against the throne, watching as Sauvage was dragged away. "Well, Bao, I'd say that's another job well done." Bao sighed in relief. "Sir, I can't believe it worked." Johnny smirked. "Bao, when have I ever let you down?" Bao opened his mouth, then thought better of it. Johnny clapped his hands. "Now, who's up for some celebratory tea?" As the My-7 agents dragged Pascal Sauvage away, the throne room of Buckingham Palace remained in stunned silence. The tension in the air had not yet dissolved, as the gathered nobles, officials, and members of the press tried to process the events that had just unfolded. Sauvage had been moments away from securing the crown, but Johnny English, against all odds, had exposed him in front of the entire world. Johnny, still leaning casually against the royal throne, adjusted his disheveled bow tie and smirked. Well, that was rather exhilarating. Bao, who had barely recovered from the high-stakes infiltration, was still breathing heavily beside him. "Sir, I can't believe we actually pulled it off." Johnny turned to him with a knowing grin. "Bo, my dear fellow, you must learn to have a little faith in me." The assembled reporters wasted no time. Cameras flashed, and microphones were thrust in Johnny's direction as a wave of questions hit him all at once. "Mr. English, how did you manage to uncover Sauvage's plot? Did you really infiltrate the palace through ancient tunnels? What will happen to the monarchy now?" Johnny took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's just say that saving the nation is all in a day's work for a world-class secret agent." He struck a pose, basking in the attention. Bao leaned in, whispering urgently. "Sir, technically, you're not supposed to reveal yourself as an My-7 agent." Johnny nodded sagely. "Right, good point." He then turned back to the press and cleared his throat. "Of course, what I meant to say is, I am but a humble servant of Her Majesty's government." No need for applause. One of the reporters looked skeptical. "Sir, you just revealed a top-secret mission on live television." Johnny coughed. "Right, well, moving on." Before he could make an even bigger spectacle of himself, Pegasus stormed into the throne room with her usual commanding presence. She was flanked by more My-7 agents, her sharp gaze scanning the room before landing on Johnny and Bao. "English," she said through gritted teeth. "A word. Now." Johnny clapped his hands together. "Ah, Pegasus. I was just about to." "Now." Johnny gulped, realizing that his moment of triumph might be short-lived. He turned to Bao, whispering, She sounds a bit cross, doesn't she? Bao simply patted him on the back. Good luck, sir. A short while later, Johnny found himself standing in Pegasus' office at Miss Seven headquarters, where the atmosphere was significantly less celebratory. The room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the massive digital screens displaying news coverage of Savage's downfall. Pegasus paced behind her desk, arms crossed, eyes sharp as a hawk. Johnny stood at attention, hands folded behind his back, attempting to look as professional as possible, though the dirt and grime from the tunnels, combined with the fact that his tuxedo was still soaked from the flooded passageway, made him look anything but. English, Pegasus began, her tone dangerously calm. Do you have any idea how much diplomatic damage you could have caused? Johnny cleared his throat. Well, if by damage you mean heroic intervention, then yes, I believe I do. Pegasus pinched the bridge of her nose. You broke into Buckingham Palace through an ancient and highly restricted tunnel system. You set off explosives inside a historical landmark. You broadcast classified intelligence on national television. And worst of all, you sat on the Queen's throne. Johnny winced. Ah, yes. About that last one, technically, I was merely leaning against it. Pegasus' eyes narrowed. You struck a victory pose on it, English. Johnny hesitated. Right. Small difference. Bao, who had wisely remained silent until now, finally spoke up. Ma'am, if I may, despite some unorthodox methods, Johnny English did prevent a national crisis. Pegasus sighed, rubbing her temples. That may be true, Bao, but the Prime Minister is not pleased. Miss Seven is supposed to operate from the shadows, not turn a high-profile mission into a public spectacle. Johnny shrugged. To be fair, it wasn't exactly a low-profile threat, was it? Sauvage wanted to become King of England. Pegasus exhaled, clearly trying to maintain her patience. Regardless, the government is now scrambling to do damage control. And Miss Seven's reputation? On thin ice. Johnny, sensing an opportunity, straightened up. Well, if that's the case, perhaps the best way to restore My Seven's reputation is to publicly commend its finest agent. Pegasus stared at him, her expression unreadable. And you believe that agent is you? Johnny flashed his signature grin. I mean, I did single-handedly take down a power-hungry billionaire, foil a coup, and protect the British monarchy. Not bad for a day's work, wouldn't you say? Pegasus sighed heavily, but before she could deliver another scolding, and My Seven analyst rushed into the room. Ma'am, breaking news. The Queen has made an official statement. The screen in the room flickered, switching to a live broadcast from Buckingham Palace. The Queen, ever composed, addressed the nation with her usual grace. I would like to extend my gratitude to a certain individual for his rather unconventional, but ultimately heroic actions in protecting the throne. While his methods may not have been typical, his dedication to the United Kingdom is undeniable. Johnny's chest puffed out with pride. Hear that, Pegasus? Even Her Majesty approves. The Queen continued, and so, as a token of appreciation, I would like to invite this individual to a special ceremonial dinner at the palace. Johnny's jaw dropped. A royal dinner? With me? Oh, this is splendid. Pegasus, meanwhile, was speechless. She had spent most of her career reprimanding Johnny for his reckless behavior, and now the Queen herself was rewarding him. Bao chuckled. Sir, you've just received a royal invitation. Johnny grinned. Bo, old friend, it looks like my work here is far from over. Pegasus simply sighed. Just try not to embarrass My Seven any further, English. Johnny placed a hand on his chest in mock offense. Pegasus, you wound me. I am the very definition of sophistication. At that moment, he accidentally knocked over a priceless My Seven artifact from Pegasus' desk, sending it crashing to the floor. A long silence followed. Johnny cleared his throat. On second thought, perhaps I'll leave before I cause any more historical destruction. And with that, he turned on his heel and marched out of the office, head held high, ready to step into the royal spotlight. Johnny English stood outside Buckingham Palace, adjusting his freshly pressed tuxedo in the reflection of a polished Rolls-Royce parked nearby. The weight of the moment settled upon him as he took in the grandeur of the palace, its towering spires and gold-embellished gates gleaming under the glow of the evening lights. A royal invitation was no small feat. Only the most distinguished individuals were granted entry to such an exclusive event. And yet, here he was, about to attend a private dinner with the Queen herself. Bao stood beside him, looking equally polished, but his expression was laced with concern. Sir, just a gentle reminder, this is an incredibly formal occasion. No gadgets, no unplanned antics, and please, try not to set anything on fire. Johnny scoffed. Bo, honestly, do I look like the sort of man who would cause a scene at a highly prestigious royal dinner? Bao hesitated, as if replaying 100 of Johnny's previous blunders in his mind. Yes, without a doubt. Johnny gave him a wounded look before confidently striding toward the grand entrance, where 2 imposing palace guards stood at attention. As he approached, one of them wordlessly raised a hand, signaling him to halt. Name? The guard asked in a rigid tone. Johnny straightened his posture, exuding an air of authority. Agent Johnny English, my 7. You may have heard of me. The guard remained unmoved. Identification. Johnny reached into his inner jacket pocket, retrieving the gold-embossed invitation that had been delivered to my 7 headquarters that morning. He handed it over with a flourish. The guard examined it briefly, nodded, then stepped aside. Proceed. Johnny turned to Bao, flashing a smug grin. See? Seamless entry, not a single hiccup. Bao nodded, but something in his expression remained uneasy. Just try to remember that you're among diplomats, royals, and high-ranking officials tonight, sir. You might want to avoid drawing attention to yourself. Johnny waved him off. Bo, please. I am the very essence of subtlety. With that, he strode inside, ready to mingle with the elite. The grand banquet hall was an architectural marvel. Golden chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a warm glow across the immaculate white tablecloths. Exquisite china plates and crystal glasses adorned the long banquet table, where some of the most powerful individuals in the world were already seated. Johnny took his place at the table, glancing around at his distinguished company. To his left, a French ambassador delicately sipped from a glass of vintage wine. To his right, a stern-looking military general adjusted the medals on his uniform. Across from him sat an elegant woman in a deep blue evening gown, her sharp eyes studying Johnny with faint amusement. And at the far end of the table sat the Queen herself, exuding an aura of grace and authority. As the first course was served, Johnny tried his best to blend in. He lifted his spoon, carefully scooping up a portion of the delicate consommé placed before him. Just as he was about to take a sip, he noticed the French ambassador delicately swirling his spoon in a clockwise motion before sipping. The general, on the other hand, used a counterclockwise technique. Johnny hesitated. Was there a proper way to consume soup at a royal dinner? His heart raced. He had spent years mastering espionage, but nobody had ever trained him for high society dining etiquette. Not wanting to commit a faux pas, he decided to compromise by swirling his spoon both ways. It was an unfortunate decision. The conflicting motions created a small whirlpool, and with an unexpected flick of his wrist, the soup sloshed out of the bowl, directly onto the lap of the military general. A horrified silence settled over the table. Johnny froze. The general's jaw tightened, his face turning a deep shade of red as he slowly looked down at the golden broth now soaking into his pristine uniform. I believe that belongs to you, Johnny said weakly, pointing at the spilled soup. The general's fist clenched, and Bao, who had been watching anxiously from a distance, buried his face in his hands. The elegant woman across from Johnny chuckled softly. "You are quite an interesting guest, Mr. English." Johnny forced a smile. "Well, I do aim to keep things lively." The Queen, ever composed, merely dabbed her mouth with a napkin and carried on as if nothing had happened. As the evening progressed, Johnny found himself intrigued by the woman seated across from him. She had an air of mystery, her expressions unreadable, her every movement calculated yet effortless. Unable to resist, Johnny leaned forward. "Forgive me, but I don't believe we've been properly introduced." The woman smirked, swirling the champagne in her glass. "That's because I haven't introduced myself." Johnny arched an eyebrow. "A woman of secrets, I see. I do have a fondness for those." She finally relented. "I'm Evangeline Fairfax, diplomatic envoy." Johnny narrowed his eyes slightly. "Diplomatic envoy? Or something more?" Evangeline's smirk deepened. "You tell me, Agent English." He blinked in surprise. "Ah, so you do know who I am." "I make it my business to know interesting people," she said smoothly. Johnny leaned in, lowering his voice. "And are you merely an envoy, or do you have other businesses here tonight?" Evangeline chuckled. "That depends, Mr. English. Are you here for dinner, or are you here to investigate?" Before Johnny could press further, a loud crash rang through the banquet hall. All heads turned toward one of the palace servers who had tripped over a loose carpet, sending a silver platter of food hurtling through the air. Johnny's instincts kicked in. He lunged forward to catch the airborne dish, but miscalculated his momentum. Instead of gracefully saving the meal, he ended up flipping the entire tablecloth, sending plates, glasses, and utensils cascading in every direction. Another horrified silence followed. Johnny slowly looked around at the devastation he had just caused. The French ambassador looked as if he might faint. The general was gripping his soup-stained uniform in barely contained fury. And the Queen? Well, the Queen simply blinked in mild surprise. Johnny cleared his throat. "Right. I believe that's my cue to make a dignified exit." Pegasus, who had been watching in horror from the doorway, massaged her temples. "English." But before she could finish, Johnny grabbed his napkin, wiped his hands, and quickly strode toward the exit, muttering under his breath, "Well, that could have gone better." Evangeline's amused voice followed after him. "You certainly know how to make an impression, Mr. English." And as Johnny disappeared into the corridor, he had the distinct feeling that this evening was far from over. Johnny English sprinted down the polished corridors of Buckingham Palace, his polished dress shoes clicking against the marble flooring. His heart pounded in his chest, not from exertion, but from the sheer absurdity of the situation. Just moments ago, he had unintentionally turned a prestigious royal banquet into a battlefield of flying soup, shattered glass, and horrified diplomats. But as much as his latest blunder had drawn attention, a far more pressing issue had arisen. The Queen was missing. Pegasus, the director of Miss7, had stormed into the hall just as Johnny had been trying to collect himself from the latest catastrophe. With a look of pure exasperation, she had barely opened her mouth to reprimand him before being interrupted by a panicked palace guard. "Ma'am, the Queen has disappeared." She was escorted from the dining hall by her security detail, but we've lost all communication with them. That was all Johnny needed to hear. Without hesitation, he had dashed off, weaving through the palace like a man possessed. The walls were adorned with regal paintings, silent witnesses to the chaos that was about to unfold. His mind raced through the possibilities. Who would dare to abduct the Queen? And then he had his answer. As he turned a sharp corner, he came face to face with a group of men in black tactical gear. They were armed, masked, and dangerously alert. At the center of them stood a familiar face. Evangeline Fairfax, the so-called diplomatic envoy he had been speaking to earlier. A smug smirk curled at the corner of her lips. "Ah, Johnny. I was hoping you'd turn up sooner." Johnny skidded to a stop, adjusting his tie with a forced air of nonchalance. "Evangeline, my dear, if you wanted a private moment with me, you could have just asked. Kidnapping the Queen? Bit excessive, don't you think?" She chuckled, stepping forward with the grace of a woman who knew she had the upper hand. "You always were an entertaining man, Johnny, but let's not pretend you don't know what's happening here." Johnny tilted his head, feigning confusion. "I don't, actually. Why don't you explain it to me? And if you could, use simple words. I have a habit of tuning out long-winded monologues." Evangeline's eyes darkened with amusement, but she indulged him. "Fine, you see, Johnny. The Queen is no longer necessary. Our associates have been working towards this moment for years. A simple reshuffling of power, if you will. A more modern approach to leadership." Johnny arched an eyebrow. "And by modern approach, I assume you mean highly illegal coup." Evangeline sighed. "You always see things in black and white. I suppose you prefer a shade of treasonous gray." One of the masked men shifted uneasily. Evangeline, however, remained as composed as ever. "You should leave, Johnny. Walk away. Be a good little spy, and maybe, just maybe, we'll let you live to see the morning." Johnny let out a mock gasp, placing a hand over his heart. "You'd let me live? How generous. And here I was, worried that I'd have to fight my way out of this." And before anyone could react, he lunged forward. Johnny grabbed the nearest masked man, using his momentum to swing him into another. The two crashed into the antique display case beside them, sending priceless royal artifacts clattering onto the floor. One of them, a particularly heavy golden candlestick, bounced toward Johnny's feet. He scooped it up without hesitation. "Perfect. A gentleman's weapon." Evangeline took a graceful step back, watching as her guards attempted to subdue Johnny. One swung a baton, but Johnny ducked, delivering a well-placed kick to his kneecap. The second man lunged, but Johnny used the golden candlestick to deflect the attack, sending the thug sprawling onto a velvet-lined chaise lounge. A third assailant tried to pin Johnny's arm behind his back. Thinking quickly, Johnny stomped hard on his attacker's foot, eliciting a pained yelp. With a swift twist, he sent the man flying into an ornate suit of armor, which promptly collapsed with a deafening clang. Johnny twirled the candlestick in his hand like a makeshift fencing foil. "Really, Evangeline, you should have brought more men." Evangeline rolled her eyes. "You are insufferable." With a flick of her wrist, she motioned to her final guard, a towering brute of a man with arms the size of tree trunks. He cracked his knuckles and advanced toward Johnny. Johnny grimaced. "Ah, now this might be a problem." The brute swung, and Johnny barely dodged in time, feeling the gust of air as the fist narrowly missed his head. He ducked, weaving through the brute's relentless barrage of punches until, by sheer luck, his foot caught on the Queen's red carpet. He tripped. The brute, mid-punch, lost his balance trying to hit him, and instead went crashing straight into a wall-length mirror. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the corridor. Johnny picked himself up, dusting off his suit. "I meant to do that." Evangeline, now visibly irritated, pulled a sleek handgun from her holster. "Enough games, Johnny." But before she could fire, a commanding voice interrupted. "That's quite enough." The Queen stood at the end of the corridor, flanked by a team of palace guards, her expression unreadable. Evangeline froze. The armed men accompanying her immediately dropped their weapons, realizing their position was hopeless. Johnny straightened his posture, smoothing back his hair. "Your Majesty, I was just about to rescue you." The Queen's lips twitched in amusement. "Yes, Mr. English. I could see that." Evangeline glared at Johnny. "You are an absolute menace." Johnny grinned. "Why, thank you." The guards swiftly moved in, placing Evangeline and her remaining men in handcuffs. Pegasus arrived moments later, her expression a mixture of exhaustion and begrudging relief. "English," she sighed. "I don't know how you keep doing this." Johnny beamed. "Talent, Pegasus. Pure, unfiltered talent." The Queen gave him a regal nod, then turned to her guards. "Let's ensure our guests are properly escorted to the Tower of London." Evangeline shot Johnny a final glare before being dragged away. Johnny watched them go before turning back to the Queen. "If I may say, Your Majesty, you have an excellent sense of dramatic timing." She smiled. "And you, Mr. English, are a remarkable disaster. But a rather effective one." Johnny took that as the highest possible compliment. Johnny English stood in the grand ceremonial hall of Buckingham Palace, adjusting his tattered tie as he surveyed the damage from his latest escapade. The remnants of his chaotic battle against Evangeline Fairfax and her operatives were still evident: shattered glass from the ornate mirrors, priceless artifacts knocked off their pedestals, and a velvet chaise lounge now slightly lopsided thanks to an unfortunate landing by one of the Queen's would-be abductors. Despite the chaos, there was no time for rest. The final act of the conspiracy was still unfolding, and Johnny had only just begun to piece together the real plan. Evangeline's words before her arrest had been cryptic but telling. "The Queen is only the beginning. You have no idea what's coming next." Pegasus, the head of Miss Seven, approached Johnny with an exasperated but determined expression. "English, as much as it pains me to admit it, we need you to see this through. The threat isn't over yet." Johnny straightened up, brushing off a few stray feathers from a decorative palace cushion that had somehow found its way onto his suit. "Pegasus, if there's one thing I know, it's that the bad guys never stop at just one attempt. I presume we have another crisis on our hands." Pegasus handed him a confidential file, her voice low and urgent. "We intercepted an encrypted transmission. It confirms that Evangeline's team wasn't acting alone. There's a second faction moving forward with the real objective: infiltrating the coronation ceremony of the Queen's successor." Johnny's eyes widened. They weren't just after the Queen, they were setting up a power shift. Pegasus nodded. "Exactly. The plan wasn't to eliminate the monarchy entirely. It was to install a puppet leader, someone controlled by their network. The Queen's abduction was a diversion, meant to create enough instability for them to slip their chosen figure into power." Johnny exhaled sharply, tapping his chin. "And I suppose you need a highly trained agent to neutralize this threat before the coronation begins?" Pegasus' expression darkened. "Unfortunately, all our best operatives are tied up handling the cleanup from your previous mess." Johnny grinned. "So that leaves me, doesn't it?" Pegasus sighed. "Yes, it leaves you." With little time to prepare, Johnny was rushed into disguise mode. The coronation was set to begin within the hour at Westminster Abbey, with guests including dignitaries, world leaders, and the entirety of the British aristocracy. Security was already on high alert, and the presence of Miss Seven operatives made it nearly impossible for a traditional infiltration attempt. Naturally, that meant Johnny had to improvise. Within 20 minutes, he found himself standing in front of a mirror, dressed in a full ceremonial outfit meant for one of the royal heralds, a vibrant red and gold robe with an outrageously oversized feathered hat. He adjusted the plumed headpiece with a disgruntled sigh. "Pegasus, do I really have to wear this? I look like a flamingo that lost a bet." Pegasus, speaking through his hidden earpiece, had no patience for his complaints. "English, stay focused. Your cover identity is Lord Winston Featherbottom, an esteemed royal herald. This will allow you access to the inner chambers of Westminster Abbey." Johnny squinted at himself. "Featherbottom? That's hardly a dignified name." "Get over it," Pegasus snapped. "Your objective is to locate the impostor before they can be crowned." Johnny sighed dramatically but adjusted his posture, stepping out into the royal motorcade that would take him to the Abbey. As he climbed into the luxurious carriage, he noticed several other heralds sitting stiffly across from him, all dressed in identical ceremonial attire. They regarded him with mild suspicion, which wasn't helped when Johnny accidentally sat on the horn of a hidden bugle within his robe, producing a humiliating honk that echoed through the carriage. The other heralds gave him sideways glances. Johnny cleared his throat. Apologies. Must have been the wind. As the grand procession arrived at Westminster Abbey, Johnny filed in with the other heralds, carefully keeping an eye on the gathering aristocrats. The ceremony was unfolding with meticulous precision, and the entire abbey was brimming with security personnel. Then, something caught his eye. A tall, stately figure in royal regalia stood at the far end of the chamber, preparing to ascend to the ceremonial throne. Everything about the figure seemed correct. The posture, the attire, even the mannerisms. But there was one problem. Johnny had seen the real successor being escorted to a secure chamber earlier, under My-7's protection, which meant the person standing before the throne was an imposter. Johnny's mind raced. If the plan succeeded and the false heir was crowned, they would have legitimate control over key decisions in the British government. My-7 would spend years unraveling the political disaster, and by then, the conspirators would have secured their power. He had seconds to act. Johnny did the only thing that made sense. He charged down the aisle, his ceremonial robes billowing behind him, as the guests gasped in shock. "Stop that man! He is an imposter!" Johnny bellowed, pointing dramatically at the false heir. The entire room froze, stunned into silence. Unfortunately, the Archbishop, an elderly, dignified man holding the royal scepter, looked deeply confused and assumed Johnny was referring to him. "I beg your pardon," the Archbishop exclaimed. Johnny skidded to a stop, realizing his mistake. "Not you, Your Holiness, the other imposter." But by then, security had already tackled him. Pinned beneath 3 very large royal guards, Johnny groaned. "Oh, come on. I was trying to help." From the throne, the false heir smirked. He knew that Johnny was onto him. But with security focused on the wrong man, his plan was moments away from succeeding. Pegasus' panicked voice crackled through Johnny's earpiece. "English, you absolute moron. You just ruined everything." But Johnny wasn't finished yet. Even as the guards hauled him up, he spotted a golden ceremonial trumpet resting on a pedestal nearby. Thinking fast, he threw himself backward, grabbed the instrument, and, with all the breath in his lungs, let out the most deafening trumpet blast in royal history. The sheer volume stunned the entire hall, including the false heir. At that exact moment, the real heir, who had been waiting in a side chamber, burst into the room with a group of My-7 agents. The impostor's smirk vanished. Johnny grinned. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have an uninvited guest." And with that, the entire ceremony erupted into chaos. The Westminster Abbey was in a state of absolute uproar. The grand coronation ceremony had turned into a battlefield of deception as Johnny English's trumpet blast rang through the vast chamber, stunning every single guest, guard, and noble in attendance. The false heir, whose smug confidence had been unwavering moments ago, suddenly looked like a deer caught in headlights. His disguise was unraveling, and the real successor, accompanied by My-7 agents, had arrived to expose the ruse. Pinned down by security, Johnny struggled against the iron grip of the guards. He wriggled, kicked, and even tried to utilize an ancient My-7 escape maneuver, which mostly consisted of wildly flailing his limbs. But to no avail. Pegasus' furious voice crackled through his earpiece. "English, I don't know how, but you have once again made things infinitely worse. Do you have any idea how delicate this operation was supposed to be?" Johnny grinned, despite being held down. "Delicate operations are for amateurs. I like to add a bit of... He suddenly twisted his wrist, reaching into the sleeve of his absurdly large Royal Herald costume. A tiny, smoke-emitting gadget slipped into his palm. one of my seven's most unconventional but effective tools. With a swift motion, Johnny squeezed the button on the device. Immediately, a thick cloud of colored smoke erupted from his sleeve, engulfing the guards in a choking haze. Coughing and temporarily blinded, they loosened their grip just enough for Johnny to roll out of their grasp and tumble ungracefully onto the ceremonial carpet. "Sorry, gentlemen," he said, straightening his ruffled robes. "Royal business." The false heir, realizing his moment of exposure had come, bolted towards the private exit reserved for the royal family. Johnny immediately sprang into action, his years of intensive spy training, or rather, his years of bumbling through my 7 training, kicking in. He charged forward, dodging startled dignitaries and hurtling over a long gilded banquet table, knocking over priceless silverware, and shattering a 17th century candelabra in the process. The impostor had almost reached the side doors, his gloved hand extending toward the handle. If he got through, the corridors of Westminster Abbey would provide a maze of escape routes, and Johnny knew my 7 wouldn't be able to contain him. Thinking fast, Johnny did the only logical thing. He grabbed the closest available object, a ceremonial scepter, and hurled it like a javelin. The heavy, jewel-encrusted scepter spun through the air and smacked the impostor squarely in the back of the head. With a stunned gasp, he stumbled forward, crashing face-first into the heavy wooden doors before slumping onto the floor. The entire abbey went silent. Johnny took a deep breath, dusting off his hands. That's how you stop a coup. As Miss 7 agents swarmed in, the impostor was forcibly turned over. The moment they ripped away the elaborate disguise, gasps filled the grand hall. Beneath the royal attire was a known criminal mastermind, one of the key conspirators behind Evangeline Fairfax's plot. He had used advanced prosthetics and deception to impersonate the next in line to the throne. Pegasus, now standing over the scene with a mixture of relief and barely contained rage, let out a long, exhausted sigh. "English," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You may be the most infuriating, reckless agent I have ever had the misfortune of working with." Johnny beamed. "Thank you, Pegasus. That means a lot. But for once you actually did something right." The crowd of onlookers and dignitaries, who had previously been thrown into a whirlwind of confusion, erupted into cheers. The real heir was escorted to the throne, and the ceremony, though now significantly delayed, was set to continue without further disruption. Later that evening, back at my 7 headquarters, Johnny English sat in Pegasus' office, grinning ear to ear. Despite his usual mishaps, it was undeniable that he had once again saved the day. Pegasus, sitting across from him with a blank, unreadable expression, held a sealed envelope in her hands. "English," she began, her tone formal. "Given your role in exposing the conspiracy and preventing what would have been an unprecedented political disaster, my 7 has decided to recognize your efforts." Johnny leaned forward excitedly. "Ah, a promotion perhaps? Knighthood? The Agent of the Year award?" Pegasus cleared her throat, sliding the envelope toward him. Johnny eagerly tore it open, only to find a stunningly large invoice listing damages totaling several £1,000,000. "What's this?" he asked, blinking in confusion. "The estimated cost of the destruction you caused," Pegasus replied flatly. "Miss 7 has decided you will not be promoted, but you will be financially responsible for a few incidental expenses." Johnny gawked at the absurd total. £7 million, what could possibly have cost that much? Pegasus raised an eyebrow. "Let's see, you destroyed a priceless candelabra. You toppled an entire banquet table, causing wine spills on a 400-year-old carpet. Oh, and you used royal scepter as a projectile weapon." Johnny leaned back, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "Well, in my defense, the scepter throw was absolutely legendary." Pegasus's expression remained unreadable. Johnny grinned. "All right, fine. Just tell me, was the Queen impressed?" Pegasus paused. She called you an absolute disgrace to British intelligence. Johnny smirked. Ah, but did she say it with admiration? Pegasus let out a deep sigh, rubbing her temples. English, just get out of my office. As Johnny strolled out of headquarters, hands in his pockets, a familiar Mi-7 operative rushed up to him. Sir, we have a new crisis unfolding in Monte Carlo. Mi-7 needs our best. Johnny cut him off with a wave. Ah, say no more. Monte Carlo, you say? Glamour, danger, possibly a casino heist? I accept. The agent hesitated. We haven't actually assigned you yet. But Johnny was already walking away, humming triumphantly to himself. As the sun set over London, one thing was certain: Johnny English wasn't done saving the world. In 2003, Rowan Atkinson, best known for his iconic portrayal of Mr. Bean, brought to life a completely different kind of comedic character, one who, despite his title as a British spy, was anything but competent. Johnny English is a movie that doesn't take itself seriously, and that's exactly what makes it so much fun. The film follows Johnny English, an overly confident yet utterly clueless Mi-7 agent, who finds himself thrust into a high-stakes mission when every other spy in the organization is wiped out. With his equally confused assistant Bao, Ben Miller, by his side, English stumbles his way through espionage, unintentionally uncovering a plot by the villainous Pascal Sauvage, John Malkovich, to steal the British crown and turn the United Kingdom into a prison state. What makes Johnny English stand out is Rowan Atkinson's impeccable comedic timing. His ability to switch between arrogance and sheer idiocy within seconds is pure gold. The film is packed with slapstick humor, absurd gadget malfunctions, and some of the most ridiculous action sequences ever put to screen, like the unforgettable moment when English parachutes onto the wrong building and delivers an intense, heroic speech to a bewildered audience of office workers. Sure, the plot is predictable, but the comedy is timeless. The film doesn't rely on deep storytelling or elaborate twists. It thrives on the absurdity of a man who genuinely believes he's a great spy, even when the evidence suggests otherwise. If you're a fan of Mr. Bean or the Pink Panther, this movie is right up your alley. And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Johnny English. Whether you love it for its slapstick humor, Atkinson's comedic genius, or just the sheer absurdity of it all, one thing's for sure: this spy knows how to make us laugh. What's your favorite Johnny English moment? Let us know in the comments.